there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Friday, February 27, 2015. Today starts 4 days of special programming from True News regarding the multifaceted jihad that is being waged aggressively against Western nations. Jihad is not limited to terroristic bombings, beheadings, and bloodshed. There is a vast array of jihadist operations currently underway in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, Europe, and Australia. For example, London declared this week its intention to become the global capital of Islamic Sharia finance. Last year, Great Britain became the first non-Islamic nation to offer Sharia-compliant bonds. The Islamic Sharia finance industry is estimated to be worth $2 trillion. Chancellor George Osborne said this week that becoming Sharia compliant will make Britain the undisputed center of the global financial system. This is one more example of jihad, which is enabling Islam to take over a Western Christian nation. In my view, Britain has already fallen. The most popular name for boys born last year in Great Britain was Muhammad. I suspect that Prince Charles secretly converted to Islam years ago. When Charles ascends to the throne, I expect him to rule Britain as that country's first Islamic monarch. Monday's program will focus on the origins of the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm going to rebroadcast two very important interviews from our radio archives. First, I will rebroadcast my February 2011 interview with Mr. John Loftus, a former Nazi hunter for the United States Department of Justice. In that interview, Mr. Loftus exposed the Nazi connection to the Muslim Brotherhood. He said that the Arab Nazis were the intelligence arm of Hitler's Third Reich and that they had an organization called the Muslim Brotherhood. I will also rebroadcast on Monday my July 2010 interview with Mr. Ian Johnson, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He wrote the book A Mosque in Munich, Nazis, the CIA, and the Rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in the West. His book explains how the Central Intelligence Agency, in the aftermath of World War II, attempted to use a Nazi-inspired Islamic mosque in Munich, Germany, for Cold War operations against the Soviet Union. The CIA imported into Germany Muslim Brotherhood organizer Syed Ramadan to run the mosque on behalf of the intelligence agency. The Munich mosque was funded by Saudi Arabia. Our programs on Tuesday and Wednesday will feature excerpts from 4 hours of sessions held earlier this week at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, Tennessee. The NRB graciously granted to True News permission to record the sessions and broadcast portions next week. The speakers included Dr. Erwin Lutzer, Dr. Michael Youssef, Joe Rosenberg, Dr. Richard Land, and Frank Gaffney from the Center for Security Policy. Now, regarding Mr. Gaffney, the Center for Security Policy released a report this week revealing that U.S. Congressman Andre Carson of Indiana has long been associated with individuals and organizations tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. Why is that important? Here's why. Congressman Carson was appointed by Nancy Pelosi to a seat on the U.S. House Intelligence Committee. The committee is responsible for overseeing the most sensitive and top secret American efforts to counter domestic and foreign enemies of the United States. In addition to having a Muslim Brotherhood-friendly member of the House Intelligence Committee, Jihad Barry Obama appointed a Muslim linked to the Muslim Brotherhood to direct Mr. Obama's alleged war against ISIS jihadists who are beheading Christians. Rashad Hossein will assume leadership in April of the U.S. State Department's Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communications. Cal Thomas recently wrote, quote, Hussein, a devout Muslim, has a history of participating in events connected with the Muslim Brotherhood, end of quote. I want you to understand that the Muslims are infiltrating us from many directions. They are chipping away at the foundation of our nation and society with the intent of toppling the West as a Christian civilization. Now, there's one more thing I need to say before I introduce our guest. Juliana Tamarezi was here yesterday. She's the founder and president of the Iraqi Christian Relief Council. Juliana is an Assyrian Christian born in Iran who sought refugee status in America to escape Islamic persecution. Her organization provides humanitarian relief for the Assyrian Christians in northern Iraq and southern Syria who have fled their homes and churches as ISIS has taken over many Christian cities, towns, and villages. Now, the Assyrian Christians trace their spiritual lineage to the apostles. In fact, their lineage goes as far back as Jonah. Their ancestors lived in Nineveh, now known as Mosul, Iraq. The Assyrian Christians, the people that we are hearing and reading about today, who are being beheaded and chased out of their homes and their churches burned down, those Assyrian Christians are the descendants of the men and women who repented when Jonah preached his warning. Within the past 6 months, all Christianity has been abolished in Nineveh, modern-day Mosul. My friends, this has not happened in 2,000 years. There has been Christianity in Nineveh for 2,000 years. Now, in 2015, it no longer exists. Many Christians have been beheaded or impaled on church crosses. Churches were burned down or converted to mosques. Ancient Christian manuscripts were destroyed. Survivors fled into the mountains and deserts to escape the swords of ISIS. Days ago, a member of Juliana's board of directors received the horrific news while they were attending the National Religious Broadcasters Convention that members of her family were executed by ISIS this week, and others are missing. Now, I know you care, and I know you want to do something to help our brethren, and here's what we're doing. True News will give 50% of all donations given to us between 6 p.m. yesterday, at the time that we broadcast yesterday's program, Thursday, and this Saturday, February 28th. If you give online at TrueNews.com or at PayPal before midnight tomorrow night, Saturday, we will send half of it to Juliana's Iraqi Christian Relief Council. Likewise, any check or money order that we receive, and it's dated February 26th, 27th, or 28th, we will share half of it with the Iraqi Christian Relief Council. Now, last year, using this method, True News gave away over $250,000 to various organizations, and we're going to continue this sharing method this year. Our address is Post Office Box 690069, P.O. Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida. Our zip is 32969. Again, if you send a check and it's dated February 26th or the 27th or the 28th, doesn't matter when we receive it next week, we will share 50% of it with the Iraqi Christian Relief Council, and any donation that comes in online starting from last night until midnight tomorrow, Saturday, we will make sure that 50% is given to the Iraqi Christian Relief Council. Again, our address, P.O. Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida, 32969. You can give online at TRUNEWS, TRUNEWS, TrueNews.com. If you use PayPal, use the address support@TrueNews.com. Okay, let's bring our guest into the program. Pastor Paul Blair is back with us today. He is the shepherd of Fairview Baptist Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. He's the founder and president of Reclaim America for Christ. Pastor Blair, as always, it's an honor and pleasure to have you on True News.
Rick, it's always a joy to be on with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, sir. And joining us today is Dr. Mark Christian. This is his first time on True News. He is the founder and president of the Global Faith Institute. Dr. Christian was born in Egypt. He was brought up as a child and young adult as a Muslim. And today he serves Jesus Christ. Dr. Christian, we're glad to have you here today, too.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
Yes, sir. I want to start with you, Dr. Christian, and introduce yourself to our audience. You grew up in Egypt. Your father was a prominent physician in Egypt. So give us a brief history of your life.
Yes, my dad actually still is a prominent physician and a religious leader and a veteran in Egypt, and a very successful businessman and a community leader as well. To introduce myself, my name is Mark Christian. This is not the name that I was born with. I was born Muhammad Abdullah, and I was a Sunni Muslim, very devout, started memorizing the Quran when I was 5 years old, and I continued being a very devout student, and later on a teacher of Islam. From the age of 12, I became an imam myself. Until the age of 23, when I started questioning Islam, not because it's a violent religion, not because of the bloodshed that was going on, just because I wanted to understand my own religion that I grew up in more deeply. And that led me into distancing myself from Islam, because Islam proved to be a false religion, not the right way to God. And every historical thing that I hold dear became a false proof. And that's part of it is the Quran itself, the textbook or the scripture of Islam that they hold dear as the right exact word of God, and that proved to be wrong, completely wrong. And this is why I distanced myself from Islam, and I left Islam, and I continue for the next 7 years of my life trying to live my life without God whatsoever, and that led me to a life of sin, emptiness, and broken heart. And that kind of situation led me to try to find who is the real God is. And I went into a journey to find who God is, and that led me to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In 2003, I became a Christian, and in 2005, I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and my life never been the same since.
And has it cost you anything?
I am dearly blessed. But in that journey, I lost everything that I have from earthly perspective. I was trained as a physician. I practiced medicine. I had many earthly positions. I lost all of that. Plus, my dad and my family disowned me, and they want me dead at any cost.
They want you dead?
Definitely, 100%. I grew up very close to my dad. My dad wore many hats, and my family looked up to me as the one who's going to take his position, and I was like their darling. And now I am their enemy, and it's not only my family who hates me, it's the whole community, all my friends. I lost everything from an earthly perspective because of my conversion and leaving Islam, but I gained everything that is holy and it is accountable in the eyes of God, and I'm blessed.
Dr. Christian, is it an accepted belief in Islam that anybody who renounces Islam and converts to another religion is automatically targeted for a death sentence?
Apostasy from Islam, punishment is death. This is what the Prophet, the founder of Islam, I call him Prophet just because of respect to Muslims, but I don't think he is a real prophet. And the founder of Islam said, whoever leaves Islam, kill him. Straightforward like that. And the successor of Muhammad, Abu Bakr, the first leader of the Muslim state, he led a war for 2 years to fight anybody who leaves Islam. And the war that he led is called the apostasy war. So the apostasy is a very important part of the Islamic law, and the person that leaves Islam has to be put to death, especially men. Women are not supposed to be killed. According to Sharia law, it is men that has to be killed after 3 days of trying to gain him back to Islam. And he has to be killed. This is a fact, not something that we can negotiate over. This is every person in the Muslim world knows that by heart. Every kid, even if he's not practicing Islam, knows that very well. You go around any country, any Muslim family, and ask him what is the punishment of apostasy, they will tell you death. But try not to be a Christian or a Western journalist when you ask that question, because lying is part of the Islamic doctrine as well.
Dr. Christian, Barack Hussein Obama, his father was a Sunni Muslim. His stepfather, Mr. Sotoro, was a Sunni Muslim. Mr. Obama was raised in Indonesia as a Muslim. He claims to be a Christian, which means, if we take him at his word, he left Islam for Christianity. So if that's true, would there not be a death sentence on Mr. Obama for renouncing Islam?
No. I'm going to tell you why. By Islamic code, President Obama has no choice other to be a practicing Muslim, and if he leaves Islam, he has to be put to death the same way that following the apostasy law. But within the apostasy law itself says a couple of things. First one is, if the Muslim who left Islam and he continued being of service to the Muslim cause and the Muslim Ummah, which is the Muslim state, then he is not supposed to be punished by death, and he's not supposed to be called an apostate, and they let him live because of the benefit that the Muslim Ummah is getting out of him. This is part of Sharia law that has been put by Muhammad and his first followers. This is 1,300 years before President Obama, and this has been the case for 1,300 years. So again, to recap that, President Obama, by Islamic code and Islamic law, he is supposed to be a Muslim. He does not have a choice between practicing Islam or anything else. But because he is serving in a way, and I don't have any doubt in my mind that he is serving and helping the Muslim Ummah by his actions nowadays, and he is upfront about that. He talks about Islam is a religion of, peace, and Islam is an amazing religion, and he constantly defending Islam in his speeches. Then he is serving the Islamic Ummah. This is why he can go to Saudi Arabia, shake hands with the king, and no problem whatsoever.
Pastor Blair, as we see on television and the internet, these horrific, horrible images coming out of the Middle East of brutal slaughter of Christians, beheading men, women, and children, cutting children in half in front of their parents, impaling Christians on crosses, even driving Christian crosses down the throats of Christians. As a pastor and as a Christian, a child of God, what goes through your heart? What goes through your mind as you see these images?
Well, obviously, great heartache, grief for brothers and sisters, parts of the body of Christ that are paying the ultimate price, actually giving the ultimate testimony, their martyrdom for their faith. And it's something that we can't comprehend here in America, but it is something that Jesus told his followers of during his own lifetime. He said in John 15, that great sermon that he talked to his disciples about on the night of his eventual arrest, he said, "The world hates me. They're going to hate you as well." And we see that as true. You know, the beginning with the at least 10 of the 11 apostles, they all died horrible deaths, being tortured for their faith, and all they had to do was recant that Jesus was the Christ and that he was not risen from the dead, yet they could not, because they could not deny the truth. And that has been the general reality of Christianity for 2,000 years. We see Christians persecuted beginning in Acts 3 and 4, with Peter and John being arrested. And whether it be the Sanhedrin or pagan Rome or the dark ages of the Holy Roman Catholic Empire or even around the world in communist or Muslim nations today, true Christians have always been persecuted for their faith. We in America are the only generation of Christians that have been able to hold civil and religious liberty, been able to practice our faith freely without fear of persecution or prosecution. And we take it for granted, and we don't understand the treasure that we have been given here. So we, quite frankly, Rick, are the ones that are most concerning. Those believers that are in the Middle East hold the reality of their faith in Jesus Christ so dear that they would rather die than deny Christ. It's that real to them. But we have been so comfortable here in America for so long, I wonder what the response would be in the average church in America if we were put in the same position. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to get pastors to do, and I certainly want to equip my church for. We are doing an overwhelming emphasis on apologetics and biblical worldview, the reality of the faith that we have, for two reasons. Number one, we hope and we pray that we'll see a great awakening. We pray that we'll see a great revival in our country. And obviously this kind of return to fundamental truth is necessary for that to happen. But also, we as pastors better be equipping our people in case we're not successful. Because as you have talked about, as Mark has talked about, the direction of our country is certainly not an encouraging one. And unless we see a change of direction, we could, within our lifetimes, experience much the same of what we see our brothers and sisters in Christ experiencing in the Middle East.
Canon Andrew White of the Anglican Church told us a story that happened months ago. I don't recall if it was Iraq or Syria, but a family had been confronted by ISIS. ISIS had arrived in their town, and the ISIS jihadists told this Christian family, you must convert, you must renounce Jesus Christ, you must convert to Islam, or we're going to kill your children. The mother and father, frightened that they were going to see their children slaughtered in front of their eyes, did what they were told. The mom and dad converted to Islam against their will. Then the ISIS jihadists turned to the children, and if I recall, they were somewhere between ages 10 and early teens. They were fairly young, and all the children said, "No, we love Jesus." They said, "We love Yeshua. We will not renounce him. We love him." And they beheaded the children in front of the mother and father. Mm-hmm. Pastor, this stuff is happening. I can't comprehend that this kind of savagery is taking place right now.
Well, what Americans have to understand, and American Christians have to understand, is that our Great Commission is to go into all the world and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to every creature. We can't make a person accept Christ or not. Our responsibility is to let the life of Christ shine through us and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to others and trust the conviction of the Holy Spirit to convince them and that they would willingly give their hearts and lives to Christ. But we can't force anyone to become a Christian, nor do we try. It's got to be a genuine conversion of the heart. However, that is not Islam. The Islamic Great Commission is Surah 839. Fight them until there is no more unbelief, and the religion will be for Allah alone. They are compelled, they are commanded to fight against all others until all convert or die.
The Prophet of Islam, or the founder of Islam, if you mind interrupt very quickly, said a very important saying that teaches a lot about Islam. And it's a very important actually saying that is agreed on by all Muslims. That he said, I have been ordered to fight and kill people until they say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, which is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his final prophet. Pray 5 times a day and pay their tithe to the Muslim leaders. This is his own saying, and the end of the quote. And this is his own saying. And this is very important to, think about it for a little bit. Islam is not a faith that people need to believe in. It's a faith that they have to act upon. Muhammad is said that have been ordered to kill people, not to share the good news with them, not to bring them to faith, not to invite them to heaven. He says, I have been ordered them to kill them until they do what? They say, they pay, they pray. It has to be based on actions of them to do a kind of submission under the leadership of the Muslim community and the Muslim leadership. That speaks a lot about what Islam is really about. It is not only a religion of actions, it's a religion of submission to an earthly leadership, not to God.
Mark, in the introduction, I said that there are many facets to jihad, and I gave a few examples. How many ways are Muslims waging jihad against Western societies?
That's a very good question. To answer that, you have to understand the kinds of Islamist. Islamist is a wider kind of term over terrorist or jihadi or whatever. An Islamist who's a guy who believes in the mission of Muhammad and who wants to make Islam superior and supreme all over the earth. And there is different kinds of Islamists. The terrorist that we talk about on a regular basis, usually a person who is not that much of a religious person. He is somebody who is living his life usually in sin or astray in a way, and he is loaded and overloaded by the sin and the conviction of going to hell because he grew up in a Muslim country, Muslim family, whatever the situation is, and he is looking for his salvation and his redemption. And this is the guy who is easily lured into go and fight and become a foot soldier of Islam. And those are the terrorists that we deal with on a regular basis. The very good example are the people who are recruited into ISIS right now, or the people who carried the attack in France. The other kind of Islamists are the most dangerous one. It's like my dad and my uncle and many others over here. Most of those guys are not willing to pick a gun and go fight or kill themselves or kill anybody. Those guys are carrying what is called the civilization jihad. What is the criteria for those guys? Very ambitious, very devoted, and very highly educated. My dad and my uncle, both of them has been picked up by the Muslim Brotherhood when they are in their teens. They are just joining junior high school, and they are trying to find their way in life. Both of them are coming from a very poor backgrounds. They don't have enough money even to go to middle school. And the Muslim Brotherhood picked them up, give them the opportunity because they want that opportunity. They are looking for a way to make it in life. Both of them right now, my uncle is a successful lawyer in Egypt, and my dad is a very successful physician in Egypt. And they have been devoted to Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood and the cause of Islam from early on. Those are the guys who are propagating the idea of Islamism and Islam and using dawah, using civilization jihad, whatever you call it, and those are most dangerous. The problem that we have in this country is, and in the West in general, there is no laws whatsoever that can protect us and protect the West and protect anybody from the wrath of the civilization jihad. There is no law whatsoever that can arrest somebody because he's propagating an idea that will recruit somebody to go and kill himself. We are always focused on the people who kill themselves. Those guys are not as dangerous or even close dangerous to the people who recruit.
Mark, I personally believe that Barack Obama is an avowed jihadist. At best, he is a jihadist sympathizer. Where would you put him between those two categories? Jihadist sympathizer or an avowed jihadist?
I do respect President Obama for his position as the President of the United States of America. I respect President Obama for how smart and dedicated he is. I do not agree with his agenda and the narrative that he is using. I don't know where he stands with God and his religion and his faith. I cannot make these decisions whatsoever. I don't have the liberty or the information to make that decision, but I do have the information that tells me very clearly from his actions, from his speeches, and from many other things in his life that he knows Islam very well. He sympathizes with Islam, and he wants to build his legacy around establishing the Islamic State and unite Muslims under the leadership of a Muslim leader again after that system has been demolished in 1924. He's very devout to that. He's also very devout to take Eastern Jerusalem out of the control of Israel and give it back to the Arabs. And all of that tells me that he is using the same narrative that Islamists has been using for many, many years, and they will continue using until they establish their goal, which is Islamic dominance in the Middle East, in the land that they claimed before, and then later on all over earth, as the Prophet promised them.
Rick, as you alluded to, in the Islamic world, there are three classifications of people. You are either a Muslim, you're one who has submitted to Allah, or you are a kafir, which is what we are, unbelievers, we're infidels, or you're a dhimmi. And a dhimmi is one that hasn't submitted formally, but has surrendered to being under the authority of Islamic rule. So the message is much the same. Whether you're a dhimmi or a Muslim, you are yielding to or submitting to that rule and that worldview. One of the things that I thought was most telling about our president was a year ago or a year plus ago after Benghazi, when he stood before the United Nations and he made the statement, "The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam." To me, that was as Islamic a phrase as I've ever heard the man utter, revealing that he is at least a dhimmi. Because, in slander, we think of slander as telling an untruth, lying about someone. But in Islam, that's not slander at all. Slander is promoting a message that is damaging to your cause. It could be true, but if it's hurting the cause, then it's considered slander. Our conversation today would be considered slander because we're telling the absolute truth to the people, but because we're telling the truth, it's hurting the cause. So, again, whether he is or isn't, Mark offers some very compelling thoughts about where he actually stands, but there's no doubt he is acting as if he is submitted to the authority of Islam.
I believe you know somebody by the fruit.
Yes.
What kind of fruit is dangling off that tree? And with Obama, it is pro-Islamic. Not only pro-Islamic, it is his policies are fueling the bloodshed in the Middle East. In fact, I thoroughly believe that U.S. intelligence agencies and the Pentagon are secretly behind the funding and arming of ISIS. I have a lot of reason to believe that. I've had people on this program from former CIA and intelligence officers on this program who've said, "Look, the Obama administration is arming these jihadists. This is a deliberate policy." So we have a man in the White House who is extremely dangerous, and the whole Middle East is on fire. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt for a second? I do not know really, and I don't think anybody can know what kind of religion President Obama practices, or even he believes in God in general, And the reason I'm saying this is because there is lots of people who actually grow up Christians or grow up Jews or grow up Americans, and they hate their country and they hate Israel and they hate God in general, and they are helping the same narrative Islamist all over. So, whether President Obama is a Muslim or not is not the problem. The problem is where he stands and what kind of action he's taking. And there is lots of people who are doing the same thing. Hillary Clinton is one of the people that did not grow up a Muslim. I don't think she's a Muslim or convert to Islam in any way, but she is helping Islamists in ways that never presented before. I can quote you Dr. Hathout's statement that he said back in the 80s when he first came over here. Dr. Hathout is a guy who is a physician. He's an OBGYN as well. He's from the Muslim Brotherhood. I met him once before he left Egypt, went to Kuwait, and then he came over here and started many front groups of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. And he just died in December 30th of this 2014. And one of his statements back in the 80s, he said, if Islam reach any goals, and if the Muslim state reach its goals, he did not mention what those goals are, but he said that. And then he said, we will give all the credit to Hillary Rodham Clinton for her dedication and her help to the Muslim causes. And this is back in the 80s. Obama was not even in the stage. This is Hillary Clinton that at that time was the first lady, and she was the wife of President Clinton. And she's the one who invited the Muslim Brotherhood to speak for the first time in history at the White House in the Rose Garden. And Dr. Hathout was the speaker at that day.
Mark, could the connection be that Hillary Clinton and Mr. Obama are radical leftists I would say communists, but we'll be polite and just call them avowed leftists. But could the connection be that as leftists, they share two common enemies: the nation state of Israel and the Jewish people, and Christianity. And so the left despises both Israel and Christianity. The Muslims despise Israel and Christianity. Therefore, they share common enemies, and they are secret allies in a war against Israel and Christianity. Could that be the connection?
I would go further to say that, they are suffering from self-loathing. They are suffering from hating the success of their nations, and they don't like God in general. Whether they are Jews, Christians, or whatever their background is, they don't like God. And I have a very good example that I live in Nebraska right now, in Omaha, Nebraska. And I have one of the top leaders of, the liberal community, Susie Buffett, the daughter of, Warren Buffett, the famous Warren Buffett. Mm-hmm. And she is very liberal. She is very liberal by every stand. But when it comes to Islam, she's a big supporter of Islam. She's funding the mosque over here by $10 million. She is helping them in every way possible that she can do. She is trying to build something called Tri-Faith Initiative to help the Muslim Brotherhood front groups in Omaha. So when it comes to Islam, it seems like it is the common enemy that they are using against their own community. And I'm asking her, if you are very liberal, how can you stand with Islam that oppress women, that kills the homosexuals, that do all the things that you are completely a champion of? Why don't you be a liberal with Muslims as well?
It's a good question. In the introduction, I talked about some of our programs that we're going to be airing next week, and I'm going to be rebroadcasting several past interviews from 2010, 2011. Mark, were you aware of the Nazi pre-World War II and World War II era? Were you aware of the Nazi connection to the Muslim Brotherhood?
100%. I grew up with the Muslim Brotherhood. My family is so proud to be a Muslim Brotherhood family. So the history of the Muslim Brotherhood is something that we take as our family history. My grand uncle that I met twice in my life was actually one of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood organization back in the 1920s.
Your grand uncle? Your grand uncle
yes.
was one of the founders?
Yes, Hassan al-Banna started the organization with another 3 guys in one of the Suez Canal small towns, Ismailia, and then later on joined by another 16 guys, and one of those 16 guys were my grand uncle, and they built the first 20 cell of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yes, this is a fact.
Well, did you ever hear, as a young man in Egypt, did you ever hear them talking about the German Nazis?
I grew up with that. I did not hear that once. Hitler is one of the champions of the Muslim Brotherhood and the champions of the Arabs in general. Are you kidding me? I did not hear it once. I grew up with that.
So that was part of your culture.
It's still part of the culture. Hitler is one of the people that they love so much. I have people, there is lots of people. I can share with you a very quick, funny thing. There is a friend of mine who is a doctor who is named Hitler. And when he wants to go to work in England, he has to disguise his name. He cannot change his name legally in Egypt. There is no way you can change your name. So he submit his application, his information, and put a different name just because he has to go to work in England. Because you cannot have Hitler name as somebody who is working as a doctor in England. Hitler is somebody that they like so much because he killed the Jews. Starting from the beginning of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Zionist movement and the occupation and colonization, it's all lumped in one bag, and all of them are bad people, and they like Hitler because he was fighting the British and he was against the Jews. So how can you get more a hero to them more than Hitler?
If you go down this rabbit hole, it gets pretty dark and and stinky because there's a
This is the problem. I think the biggest problem is our ignorance over here. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. People are ignorant. People are living in a la la land. I was talking to Pastor Blair before the show, and he talking about political correctness. I said, I think we jumped over the political correctness fence already, and we are living in a la la land over here because people are ignorant.
They don't know history. See, there's also a CIA connection to the Muslim Brotherhood, but there's also a CIA connection to the Nazis because after World War II, the CIA brought tens of thousands of Nazis into the United States. And so this thing gets real.
The CIA connection with the Muslim Brotherhood or Islamists happened in two stages, mainly that we are dealing with right now. I think the first one was during the first Afghan war when they were helping Osama bin Laden and others to fight, the Mujahideen, to fight the Soviet Union. And then after that, Clinton did the biggest mistake and start not recruiting them anymore and let them go astray without a job because, the demolish of the Soviet Union and there is no Cold War anymore, and the Islamists start hiring some. And then the biggest problem of the CIA and infiltration happened again after the Khobar attack by the Osama bin Laden, and then after the attacks on the embassies in 1998 in Kenya and Tanzania. Those are the times when the CIA starts recruiting Islamists to help them understand Osama bin Laden and others, and this is how it was infiltrated.
And why would they want to understand Osama bin Laden when they created him?
I wouldn't say they created him. It was a legitimate fight. Again, it is out of ignorance that they start training it's an underestimating your enemy. I think America did not intend to create Osama bin Laden or Taliban or any of that people. They were trying to help a group of people that they told them they are fighting for the liberation of a Muslim land, Afghanistan, from the Soviet Union. And they underestimated their enemy. They start helping them out without thinking for a second that those guys can grow up into a giant and start attacking the United States. I don't think anybody thought that way ever because they said, those guys are living in caves. We just give them a very small and simple tactics that they can use to fight their own fight. They will never fight us back. And I think it was out of ignorance and underestimating the enemy.
Okay, I can give the CIA some leeway there. You use that tactic one time, you get blowback. You say, what, that was stupid. We'll never do that again. But the CIA, does it over and over and over, and we're doing it again right now because the CIA created ISIS. We funded and armed ISIS in order to take down the Syrian government.
I think the biggest problem actually right now that you're talking about is even worse than ISIS. President Obama is pushing out the narrative that he's going to train 25,000 Iraqi soldiers to fight ISIS. He's also training unnamed number from Kurds to train them and equip them with American, equipment. And also he's training the Free Syrian Army to fight Assad. So you are talking about, 50,000, 50 to 60 or 70,000 soldiers that are going to be trained and equipped by the Americans to fight ISIS and fight Assad and fight, different kinds of groups. How is that going to end up? Do you think after this war is over, those 70,000 highly equipped and trained soldiers are going to go and work at Burger King and flip burgers? They're going to continue fighting.
See, the way I see this as followed, and Pastor Blair, you can jump in here anytime. All right, what has it been 2 years ago? Mr. Obama wanted to invade Syria. There was all kinds of propaganda against the Syrian government and allegations of chemical weapons and such. And the buildup got really intense. And I mean, it actually got to a point we know that there was a particular date when France was going to begin the bombing campaign of Syria and the war was on. And all of a sudden it stopped. I mean, it stopped cold. And I believe that Vladimir Putin sent a message to the West and said, if you cross this line, I'm in the fight. And the whole thing just came to a stop. Then what I noticed was in the months afterwards, ISIS appeared. ISIS, and let me give you my reasoning here. I believe the West had to, they realized they got blocked from invading Syria to topple the Syrian government. They got blocked. So they had to create a monster that the world would be so repulsed by it, that the world would demand, you have to put boots on the ground. You have to invade. And where are these monsters? They're in Syria. Okay, you've got to send troops into Syria to attack ISIS. I believe it's a cover to invade Syria, to topple Assad. And the real purpose is, what you said, Mark, a few minutes ago, Mr. Obama wants a caliphate. And this is the real purpose of this strategy. He is bringing down nation after nation in the Middle East so that there can be a united caliphate. What do you guys think about that?
You're 100% true in your assessment. As a matter of fact, I wrote a detailed article about ISIS, about the fight, about what's going to happen over there, and you are exactly spot on. And I applaud you for your narrative and for your understanding of the international scene. And this is why the fight against Putin is going on, because President Putin is the only person that opposed President Obama's plans in the Middle East of establishing the Islamic State. And this is exactly why Putin has to be ousted and got out of the scene so they can move forward with their plans to take over the Middle East for the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists.
This is getting complicated, isn't it, Pastor Blair?
Well, Rick, I just wanted to say I think you're glad that I introduced you to Mark. Mark has been a great friend and ally for the last few years. I've had the privilege of ministering to him and ministering with him on several occasions. In fact, we're working on bringing Mark down to Oklahoma to speak to our legislature and to some of our college campuses. So he is a great friend and a great resource of information.
Yes, he is. But when I say it's getting complicated, I'm talking about the fact that the West is arming jihadists who are killing Christians, and Vladimir Putin is the guy standing up to them. I mean, nothing makes sense anymore.
Well, I wouldn't, yes, President Putin has been opposing President Obama in his plans, and I think this is very honorable, but still, he's not the person that we can put as a good guy.
Well, he's not a Boy Scout. I mean, he's not, I mean, we know this guy's a hard and tough ex-KGB chief, but I'm just saying that he's the one who's standing in their way of what they're trying to do. He is now made he's developing a partnership with General Sisi in Egypt, and Obama is opposing President Sisi.
The biggest problem that we are having, yes, and I know President Sisi personally, and he knows me as well. Here is the thing. Why, the question has to be this: why we do not have any leader in America at this time that understand the way that you understand things, and I can explain things more and more, and standing up to against President Obama's plans in the Middle East and tell him enough is enough, this is not right, this is not going to work. It's not only President Obama, it is the Clinton, it is the Democrats, it's the mainstream media. Nobody in America can stand up and be a good conservative, Republican, or whatever, his background is, and a great American who understands things and stand up and says, America is never and will never train terrorists and will never help any kind of plans to establish a caliphate system that has in its mind killing and subjugating every other person other than them in the whole world. This is not what America started on, and this is not what America stands for.
Pastor Blair, yesterday the Obamanista regime exerted its control of the of the internet. The FCC, under the Obaministas, arbitrarily said, we now claim authority to regulate the internet. Is this the beginning of censorship of all opposing voices of the Obama agenda?
Well, we have to recognize, and unfortunately, the average American is illiterate when it comes to this common sense knowledge. You look at history of tyranny. In order to establish any kind of tyranny in 6,000 years of human history, there are three main requirements. If your body is going to be controlled, they must control your mind. So in any kind of a tyrannical government, and again, you look back to ancient Babel with Nimrod or Nebuchadnezzar, or you bring it all the way up through Nazi Germany or Stalin's Russia, first of all, they nationalize education so they can control what you're being taught. Then they must control the influence of information. They must control the media. They have to nationalize the media. And they obviously have really largely controlled the secular media in America for the last 50 years. But the one source of liberty as far as freedom of information has been the Internet. It's necessary that they control the Internet. So this is not a surprise. And then the other area they must control is religion. If there's going to be any kind of an established tyrannical government, then government must become God. There can be no higher appeal than God. No citizen has a right to say that the government is wrong. So either you have an atheistic communism where there is no God, so by default government becomes God, or you have a theocracy where God and government are one and the same, and what government says is literally the voice of God. But no person has the right to freedom of conscience to disagree with the government. And you can see, if you look at what's going on in the United States of America, and then you add to that control of the Internet, the beginning to grasp control of the Internet, we are a long way down that trail. And unfortunately, we are mostly, as long as we can go drag money out of our ATM machines and go to work, we are completely unaware of what's going on around us.
Pastor, the city of Lake Worth, Florida, there's a Lake Worth, Texas, but this is Lake Worth, Florida. It's about 60, 70 miles south of us here in Vero Beach. It's in Palm Beach County, just south of West Palm Beach. The city of Lake Worth now requires churches to have a city business license to operate.
Sure.
All churches must be licensed. And I read an article where they quoted a pastor. He said, our church has been here for 99 years. Why do we have to have a license? And they've been ordered to apply and obtain a license. And the city is telling them, not only are you going to have a license, but we are requiring you to have a letter from the IRS stating that they recognize you as a church. This one particular church is meeting in a coffee cafe, and the city code enforcer showed up and said, this is your last Sunday. And he told the coffee cafe owner that if he permits this church to meet there one more time, the city will seize control of his property. Brother, Pastor, this is the United States of America. We're now being told that churches have to be licensed.
Well,
this is exactly like Egypt.
Yeah, we're going down that same trail that we just talked about. We see the mayor of Houston subpoenaing pastors' messages. We see that now in the American military, you can be thrown out of the military for proselytizing. We saw the Hobby Lobby case a year ago. Where in the Constitution does the federal government have the right to sue David Green for not providing the morning after pill to his employees? They do not have that right. And one of the things that we've got to understand, Rick, is we are either, and this is part of the disconnect as well, we have forgotten who we are as a people. We are either going to concede that we are now 320 million individuals ruled by our supreme leader in Washington, D.C., and a court of 9 politically appointed attorneys in black robes, or we are going to remember that we are actually a union of sovereign states that got together and through the instrument of the Constitution designed and then delegated few and defined powers to Washington. And when Washington seeks to exceed those powers, it's up to the governors and the state legislatures to tell them to go to hell. And it's not going to happen in our state. And until we get that kind of understanding of what we actually have designed here, our rule of law, like what Judge Roy Moore is attempting to do in Alabama, until we have that kind of understanding, we are little by little, and by the way, the rate is accelerating, we are going to get dump trucked, run over, until we have in America what they've had in Russia and Red China. And that's the ultimate goal.
Judge Roy Moore was here on the program a few days ago, and we played sound bites from his encounter on CNN several weeks ago with Chris Cuomo, the brother of the governor of New York. And Cuomo was just an aggressive, anti-Christian bigot. I mean, he's another guy who's going to claim he's a Christian, but listen, you could sense in his voice his animosity towards anybody who stands for God. And he told Judge Moore, our rights do not come from God. Our rights come from man, from the collective. That's the word he used. He used the Soviet term, the collective. And Pastor, we're up against this is a movement. This is a mindset. It is the way people think has changed. There's been a shift in the minds of people. And yes, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, two things, Rick. First of all, we talk about American exceptionalism. And the reason that America was, in fact, exceptional at one time is because our Declaration of Independence built our foundation on two things. Number one, there is absolute truth. It's called the law of nature and nature's God. Truth is not arbitrary. There is truth, and that's it. And then the second thing is that our rights don't come from government. The only purpose of the government is to secure our unalienable rights, which come from God. So those two pillars are upon which our country stands. And when we knew that, when we were an educated people, in fact, quite frankly, when the education was in the hands of the parents and in the hands of the churches, America was exceptional because that is what was taught to every generation, and every generation knew it. But let me say this. Woodrow Wilson wrote in a Political Science Quarterly publication in 1887, and I'll just paraphrase what he wrote, but this was the strategy for advancing the progressive agenda. He said, what one generation will resist but ultimately accept, the next generation will accept it because their parents did. And the next generation will just assume it's always been that way. And that is exactly where we are as you look back at what's taken place in America over the last 100 years. We are completely 180 degrees upside down in the way we operate from the way the rules actually say, from what the rule of law actually is. How can you take the First Amendment, which secures that the federal government cannot infringe our religious liberty? How can you take the First Amendment and use it to attack our religious liberty? Well, they have redefined what it meant. And what one generation resists but accepts, and the next generation accepts because their parents did, the next generation just assumes that that's the way it is. And now we are seeing them use the 14th Amendment. Now consider the irony of this. They are using the 14th Amendment to illegally overrule the constitutions of states that define marriage as between one man and one woman. They are using the 14th Amendment to try to ram homosexual marriage down the throats of these states. And when you think back, in 1868, homosexuality was illegal in every state. So how can you use that amendment to secure and force homosexual marriage down the throats of the people? Well, let me tell you, we have forgotten what the rules are. We are just a flock of lemmings running off the cliff. And unless we can have one state that will follow the example like a Roy Moore and actually reintroduce people to how the rule of law is supposed to operate in our country, and along with it, we need a spiritual awakening, and we need a mental awakening as well. We're heading in a wrong direction. We're heading in a scary direction.
Yes, we are. Well, we're down to about 30 seconds. Actually, we're down to about 2 seconds, 1 second, 0 seconds. There's the closing music. And this has been a fascinating conversation today. My guest, Pastor Paul Blair, Fairview Baptist Church, Edmond, Oklahoma, president of Reclaim America for Christ. And joining us today, Dr. Mark Christian, founder and president of the Global Faith Institute. I want to thank both gentlemen for spending this hour with us today. And before we go away, I want to remind you that we are going to bless the Iraqi Christian Relief Council with funds to provide humanitarian aid to our brothers and sisters in Iraq and Syria who are being persecuted, being slaughtered, being beheaded, impaled by ISIS jihadists. We will share 50% of the donations given to us this weekend. If you want to get a check in the mail, it's P.O. Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida, 32969, or give online at TRUNEWS.com. God bless you. I'll see you Monday.